The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is more than just a classic American novel. It is a profound exploration of freedom, friendship, and the moral courage to choose what is right over what society says is acceptable. Written by Mark Twain and published in 1885, this book challenged America to confront its deepest moral failures, particularly slavery and racism. Through the innocent eyes of a young boy traveling down the Mississippi River with an escaped slave, Twain created a work that is simultaneously a thrilling adventure story, a biting social satire, and a serious examination of conscience and morality. Today, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is recognized as one of the greatest American novels, a book that continues to provoke debate and force readers to examine their own values and the society they live in. To understand The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, we must first understand its creator, Mark Twain. Born Samuel Langhorne Clemens in 1835 in Missouri, a slave state, Twain grew up witnessing slavery firsthand. His childhood in the small town of Hannibal, Missouri, on the banks of the Mississippi River, provided the setting and many of the experiences that would later appear in his most famous novels. Twain's father died when he was 11, forcing him to leave school and work to support his family. He became a printer's apprentice, then a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi, which gave him his pen name. Mark Twain was a riverboat term meaning 2 fathoms deep, safe water for navigation. Twain's experiences as a riverboat pilot gave him an intimate knowledge of the Mississippi River and the diverse people who lived along its banks. This knowledge permeates every page of Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain's life was marked by both success and tragedy. He became one of America's most famous writers and humorists, known for his wit, his social criticism, and his ability to capture authentic American voices in his writing. However, his personal life was filled with loss. He lost his son Langdon at 19 months old, his daughter Susie at 24, and his beloved wife Livy after 34 years of marriage. These tragedies, combined with financial difficulties from bad investments, turned Twain's later work increasingly dark and cynical. However, when he wrote Huckleberry Finn in the early 1880s, he was at the height of his creative powers. The novel took him 7 years to complete because he kept setting it aside when he felt blocked, only to return to it later with fresh inspiration. This long gestation period allowed the book to develop layers of meaning that might not have been there if Twain had rushed it to completion. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was published in 1885, 20 years after the end of the Civil War and the official abolition of slavery. However, this was also the era of Reconstruction's failure and the rise of Jim Crow laws in the American South. African Americans who had been freed from slavery were being systematically denied their rights through violence, intimidation, and legal discrimination. In this context, Twain's decision to write a novel that humanizes an escaped slave and questions the morality of slavery was radical and controversial. The book was immediately banned by the Concord Public Library in Massachusetts, which called it trash and suitable only for the slums. This ban only increased the book's popularity, and it became a bestseller. However, the controversy over the book has never ended. It continues to be one of the most frequently challenged and banned books in America, though the reasons for objection have shifted over time from concerns about its critique of religion and society to concerns about its use of racist language. The story of Huckleberry Finn picks up where Twain's earlier novel, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, left off. Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer had found a treasure of gold coins, making Huck suddenly wealthy. Huck has been taken in by the widow Douglas, who is trying to civilize him by making him wear proper clothes, attend school, learn religion, and follow all the rules of respectable society. But Huck is a child of nature and freedom. He hates being confined by civilization's expectations. He finds church boring, school pointless, and proper behavior restrictive. His famous opening line sets the tone for the entire novel, "You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer." But that ain't no matter. This colloquial, ungrammatical voice was revolutionary in American literature. Twain was one of the first major American writers to use vernacular speech for a narrator, capturing how real people actually talked rather than using formal literary language. Huck's peaceful, if boring, life with the widow Douglas is disrupted when his violent alcoholic father, Pap, returns to town. Pap is one of the most disturbing characters in American literature, a brutal, ignorant, racist drunk who sees his son only as a source of money. When he learns that Huck has become wealthy, Pap kidnaps him and takes him to a cabin in the woods, where he keeps Huck prisoner. Pap beats Huck regularly and goes on drunken rampages. In one terrifying scene, Pap has delirium tremens and chases Huck with a knife, believing he is the angel of death. Huck realizes that his father will eventually kill him, either deliberately or in a drunken rage, so he carefully plans his escape. He fakes his own murder, making it appear that he has been killed and his body thrown in the river. This allows Huck to escape completely and start a new life free from both his abusive father and the civilizing efforts of the widow Douglas. After escaping, Huck hides on Jackson's Island in the middle of the Mississippi River. There he encounters Jim, a slave who has run away from Miss Watson, the widow Douglas's sister. Jim has overheard Miss Watson discussing selling him down the river to New Orleans, which would separate him from his wife and children forever. Fearing this terrible fate, Jim has fled, risking everything for a chance at freedom. The meeting between Huck and Jim on Jackson's Island is one of the most important moments in American literature. These two fugitives, one from an abusive father and oppressive society, the other from slavery itself, form an unlikely partnership. They decide to travel together down the Mississippi River. Their plan is to reach Cairo, Illinois, where the Ohio River joins the Mississippi. From there, they can travel up the Ohio to the Free States, where Jim can be truly free and work to buy his family's freedom. The relationship between Huck and Jim is the emotional and moral center of the novel. At the beginning, Huck has been raised in a society that teaches that slaves are property, not people, and that helping a slave escape is a serious sin and crime. Huck has internalized these beliefs, and he struggles throughout the novel with what he calls his conscience, which is actually just society's racist moral code. However, as Huck and Jim travel down the river together, sharing adventures and dangers, Huck begins to see Jim as a human being worthy of respect and love. Jim proves to be kind, loyal, and wise. He protects Huck, teaches him about the river and nature, and shows him more genuine affection than Huck's own father ever did. Jim talks about his wife and children with love and longing, expressing emotions that slave-owning society claimed black people could not feel. Through spending time with Jim and seeing his humanity firsthand, Huck's moral education truly begins. The journey down the Mississippi River forms the structure of the novel, and the river itself becomes a powerful symbol. The river represents freedom, escape from civilization's constraints, and the possibility of moral and spiritual cleansing. On the raft floating down the river, Huck and Jim create their own little world, free from the cruelty, hypocrisy, and corruption they encounter on shore. Huck describes the peace and beauty of their life on the raft in some of the most lyrical passages in American literature. He talks about watching the sunrise, swimming in the river, lying under the stars, and enjoying the simple companionship of being together. On the river, social hierarchies dissolve. Jim and Huck are equals, friends, and family to each other. However, whenever they go ashore, they encounter the corrupt, violent, and hypocritical world of civilization. The river is good. Civilization, as Twain presents it, is deeply flawed and often evil. The episodes that occur when Huck and Jim go ashore expose various aspects of American society that Twain wants to criticize. In one of the most memorable episodes, Huck witnesses a feud between two families, the Grangerfords and the Shepherdsons. These families have been killing each other for so long that no one even remembers what started the feud. They are refined, educated, and religious people who recite Bible verses and attend church together every Sunday, carrying guns. The absurdity of people claiming to be Christians while murdering each other's children reveals the hypocrisy of a society that claims moral superiority while acting with brutality and violence. The feud culminates in a massacre that kills several young men from both families, including Huck's friend, Buck Grangerford. This senseless violence horrifies Huck and cements his preference for life on the river over civilized society. Two of the most important characters in the novel are the Duke and the Dauphin, a pair of con men who board Huck and Jim's raft and take control of their journey. These frauds claim to be European nobility fallen on hard times, and they force Huck and Jim to serve them while they travel from town to town running various scams. They put on fake Shakespearean plays, pretend to be religious revivalists, and eventually attempt their most ambitious con, impersonating the brothers of a recently deceased man to steal his inheritance from his grieving daughters. The Duke and the Dauphin represent the worst aspects of American society. They exploit people's greed, religious faith, and desire for culture and entertainment. They are completely selfish and have no real loyalty even to each other. Twain uses these characters to satirize American gullibility, the fraud that often hides behind claims of nobility or authority, and the way smooth talkers can manipulate honest people. The presence of the Duke and Dauphin on the raft changes the dynamic between Huck and Jim. Jim must pretend to be the Duke's slave to avoid being recognized as a runaway, which creates a painful situation where Jim loses even the limited freedom he had on the raft. Huck wants to get rid of these con men, but he is young and unsure how to oppose them. The ultimate betrayal comes when the Duke and Dauphin, facing exposure and needing money, sell Jim to a local farmer named Silas Phelps. They collect the reward for a runaway slave, destroying Jim's chance for freedom and betraying the trust Huck had been forced to place in them. This betrayal sets up the novel's most important moral crisis for Huck. When Huck learns that Jim has been sold and is being held at the Phelps farm, he faces the defining moral choice of his life. According to everything he has been taught by his society, his religion, and his upbringing, helping a slave escape is a terrible sin that will damn his soul to hell. Huck sits down to write a letter to Miss Watson, telling her where Jim is so she can reclaim her property. Writing this letter makes Huck feel better at first. He thinks he is doing the right thing, following the moral code he has been taught. He even prays, asking for forgiveness for the wickedness of helping Jim. But then he starts thinking about their journey together. He remembers Jim's kindness, his laughter, his love for his family, and their friendship. He thinks about how Jim once took Huck's watch on the raft so Huck could sleep longer, and how Jim called him honey and protected him like a father. Huck realizes that he cannot betray his friend, no matter what society says is right. In one of the most famous passages in American literature, Huck makes his choice. He picks up the letter to Miss Watson, thinks about it for a moment, and then says, "All right then, I'll go to hell," and tears up the letter. This moment represents the climax of Huck's moral development. He chooses friendship, loyalty, and his own direct knowledge of Jim's humanity over the racist moral code of his society. He believes he is choosing evil over good, sin over righteousness, but the reader knows that Huck is actually choosing true morality over false morality, human decency over systematic oppression. Twain shows us that Huck's supposedly corrupt conscience, formed by experience and genuine human connection, is more moral than the supposedly pure conscience shaped by a slave-owning society. This reversal is one of the most powerful critiques of slavery and racism in American literature. After making this decision, Huck learns that the Phelps family, who are holding Jim, are actually Tom Sawyer's aunt and uncle. Through a series of coincidences, they mistake Huck for Tom, who is expected for a visit. Huck assumes Tom's identity, and when the real Tom Sawyer arrives, Tom plays along and pretends to be his own brother Sid. Tom learns about Jim being held prisoner and agrees to help Huck free him. However, what follows is one of the most controversial and debated sections of the novel. Tom, who loves adventure and romance, insists on freeing Jim through an elaborate escape plan based on adventure novels he has read. He makes the escape far more complicated than necessary, with tunnel digging, secret messages, and symbolic gestures that put everyone at risk. Tom treats Jim's quest for freedom as a game, a romantic adventure rather than a serious moral issue. Many readers and critics have found these final chapters frustrating because they seem to undercut the serious moral themes of the novel. After Huck's profound moral growth and his decision to go to hell rather than betray Jim, we return to Tom Sawyer's childish games and romantic fantasies. Jim, who has been portrayed as a wise, dignified character throughout the journey down the river, is reduced to playing along with Tom's absurd plans. Some critics argue that this ending is a failure of nerve on Twain's part, that he retreated into comedy because he did not know how to resolve the serious moral issues the novel raised. Others argue that Twain is deliberately showing how even the well-intentioned can trivialize the serious suffering of black people, treating their oppression as material for entertainment rather than as a profound injustice requiring serious action. The final revelation of the novel provides another controversial twist. After the cunning, elaborate and dangerous escape, which results in Tom getting shot, Tom reveals that Jim has actually been free all along. Miss Watson died 2 months earlier and freed Jim in her will. Tom has known this throughout the entire fake rescue, but did not tell anyone because he wanted to have an adventure. This revelation infuriates many readers because it means that Jim's suffering during the fake escape was completely unnecessary, that Tom put Jim at risk of being captured, beaten, or killed for the sake of a game. However, the revelation also allows Twain to make another point. Even though Jim is legally free, he is not treated as free. He is still held prisoner, still at risk of violence, still subject to white authority. Legal freedom, Twain suggests, is not the same as actual freedom or justice. This was painfully relevant to the post-Reconstruction era when Twain was writing, when African Americans were technically free but systematically denied their rights. The character of Jim is central to the novel's meaning and its ongoing controversy. Twain portrays Jim as intelligent, loving, loyal, and dignified. He shows Jim as a fully human character with deep feelings for his family, wisdom about life and nature, and moral integrity. In many ways, Jim is the most admirable adult character in the novel, certainly more moral than the Duke and Dauphin, the feuding families, Pap Finn, and even the supposedly respectable townspeople. Through Jim, Twain is making an argument against slavery and racism by showing the full humanity of a black man. However, modern readers often struggle with aspects of Jim's portrayal. Sometimes Jim seems to play into stereotypes, appearing superstitious or foolish. The language used to describe Jim and other black characters in the novel, particularly a specific racial slur used repeatedly, is deeply offensive. Twain was using the authentic language of the 1840s Missouri, but this authenticity creates real pain for modern readers, especially black students who encounter the book in school. The debate over the novel's racial language and its treatment of Jim has led to ongoing controversy about whether the book should be taught in schools. Some argue that the book is racist and perpetuates harmful stereotypes regardless of Twain's intentions. Others argue that the novel is actually anti-racist, that it uses the language and attitudes of its time precisely to critique them, and that removing it from schools means losing one of the most powerful critiques of American racism. This debate reflects a larger question about how we should handle historical works that contain offensive material but also important insights. There is no easy answer, but most scholars agree that if the novel is taught, it must be taught carefully, with full discussion of its complex racial politics and the painful history it represents. Huck Finn himself is one of the most memorable characters in American literature. He is a boy caught between childhood and adulthood, between nature and civilization, between his society's values and his own emerging moral sense. Huck is not perfect. He lies constantly. He sometimes treats Jim thoughtlessly, and he struggles with moral clarity. But he has qualities that Twain values highly. He is honest in his own way, loyal to those he cares about, skeptical of authority and hypocrisy, and willing to trust his own experience over what he has been taught. Huck's voice, with its ungrammatical but vivid and authentic language, was revolutionary in American literature. Before Twain, most American novels used formal, literary language. Twain showed that authentic American voices and experiences could be the material of serious literature. Ernest Hemingway famously said that all modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn. While this is an exaggeration, it points to the novel's enormous influence on American writing. The themes of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn go beyond its critique of slavery and racism. The novel is also about the conflict between individual conscience and social morality. Huck is constantly told what is right by the authorities in his life, the Widow Douglas, Miss Watson, Pap Finn, and the broader society. But Huck's own experiences and feelings often conflict with these teachings. The novel suggests that individual moral judgment based on genuine human connection and empathy can be more trustworthy than the moral codes of a corrupt society. This theme has resonated with generations of American readers who struggle with the tension between social expectations and personal values. The novel also explores the American dream of freedom and the reality that often contradicts it. America claims to be the land of freedom, but the novel shows a society built on slavery, marked by violence and hypocrisy, where genuine freedom is rare and difficult to maintain. Huck and Jim are both seeking freedom. Huck from civilization's constraints and his abusive father, Jim from slavery itself. On the raft, they briefly achieve a kind of freedom, but it is fragile and constantly threatened. The river carries them deeper into slave territory rather than toward the free states, suggesting that freedom is not easily obtained and that good intentions are not enough to overcome systemic injustice. In the end, neither Huck nor Jim achieves complete freedom. Jim is freed by Miss Watson's will, not through his own efforts or Huck's help, and his freedom remains precarious. Huck, in the novel's final lines, declares his intention to light out for the territory ahead of the rest because Aunt Sally wants to civilize him. Huck is still running, still seeking a freedom that may not exist. The satire in Huckleberry Finn is biting and comprehensive. Twain attacks nearly every aspect of American society: the cruelty and absurdity of slavery, the hypocrisy of Christianity as practiced in the South, the foolishness and gullibility of small-town Americans, the romantic fantasies that obscure reality, the brutal violence that lurks beneath claims of civilization, and the corruption of democratic institutions. The novel shows a society that claims to be Christian but treats people as property, that claims to be democratic but denies rights based on race, and that claims to be civilized but resolves disputes through violence. Twain's satire is effective because it is often funny. We laugh at the Duke and Doffin's ridiculous schemes, at the people who attend their fake plays, and at Tom Sawyer's elaborate nonsense. But beneath the humor is a serious critique of a society that has lost its moral compass. The ending of Huckleberry Finn has been debated and criticized for over a century, but it can also be seen as thematically appropriate. Twain does not provide a neat resolution to the moral and social problems the novel raises because those problems were not resolved in American society. Slavery had been abolished, but racism and oppression continued. The novel, written 20 years after the Civil War, reflects Twain's understanding that legal changes alone do not create justice or equality. The absurdity of the final chapters, with Tom's game playing and the revelation that Jim was free all along, can be read as Twain's comment on the absurdity of American racial politics in the post-Reconstruction era. Black Americans were technically free but still subject to violence, discrimination, and white control. Like Jim in the novel's ending, their legal freedom did not translate into actual freedom or justice. The influence of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn on American literature and culture is profound. The novel established the Mississippi River as a central symbol in American literature, representing both possibility and danger, freedom and the nation's troubled past. It influenced countless later writers who explored similar themes of innocence, experience, and moral development. The novel's vernacular style paved the way for writers like Hemingway, Faulkner, and many others who sought to capture authentic American voices. The relationship between Huck and Jim became a template for exploring interracial friendship and understanding in American literature and film. The novel's moral complexity, its refusal to provide easy answers or simple heroes, anticipates the psychological realism of 20th century literature. However, the novel's legacy is complicated by its controversial use of racial language and its complex portrayal of Jim. Many schools have removed the novel from required reading lists, and some have banned it entirely due to concerns about the harm caused by exposing students, particularly black students, to racist language. Others have created censored editions that replace the offensive language with less harmful words, though this approach has its own critics who argue that sanitizing the text removes important historical evidence of American racism. These debates about the novel reflect larger conversations about how we should remember and teach difficult aspects of our history, how we balance the value of important historical works against the harm they can cause, and whose voices and experiences should be centered in education. In conclusion, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a novel that continues to challenge and provoke readers more than a century after its publication. Mark Twain created a work that is simultaneously a thrilling adventure story, a profound moral fable, and a devastating critique of American society. Through Huck's journey down the Mississippi with Jim, Twain explores questions about freedom, friendship, conscience, and what it means to do the right thing in a society built on injustice. Huck's decision to go to hell rather than betray his friend remains one of the most powerful moments in American literature, showing us that true morality sometimes requires us to reject the values of our society and trust our own moral judgment based on human empathy and connection. The novel forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about American history and the ongoing legacy of slavery and racism. It shows us that good intentions are not enough, that legal changes alone do not create justice, and that genuine freedom remains elusive for many Americans. The novel's flaws, particularly its use of offensive language and some aspects of its racial portrayal, are real and must be acknowledged. But the novel also contains powerful anti-racist arguments and shows a level of empathy and understanding that was rare in its time. How we navigate the tension between the novel's problems and its insights reflects how we navigate the complexities of American history and identity. If you found this exploration of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn meaningful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into classic literature. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Huck's moral journey and the novel's treatment of race and freedom. Do you think the novel should still be taught in schools? And if so, how? What does Huck and Jim's relationship teach us about friendship and moral courage? These questions remain relevant as we continue to grapple with the legacy of slavery and racism in America. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep exploring the great works that challenge us to think deeply about ourselves, our society, and our values.